You hear the word cortisol and maybe you think stress hormone, but it's really not just a stress hormone.
Cortisol helps regulate your stress response. It also regulates blood sugar levels, our sleep-wake cycles, our circadian rhythm, our immune response, and just overall inflammation and tissue repair.
Some of my own experiences with cortisol. A few years ago, I was not sleeping at night. I just was so tense and stressed and anxious all of the time. I did my first cortisol test and it was crazy high. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I immediately started trying to work on rebalancing my cortisol naturally and starting to try and do the things that a person can do to get that cortisol lower. And I think we should talk about some of them because burnout is not a badge of honor. So many people still think it's a badge of honor. It's not.
You can't keep burning the candle at both ends and compromising your sleep and doing everything for everyone else without putting on your own oxygen mask first. It's very hard to feel joy, peace, and calm when you're always constantly worried.
One of the questions was, what do you worry the most about?
The bottom line is, and this is a hard message maybe to hear, but
get ready to feel amazing this fall. Our 7-day Vitality Reboot kicks off September 14th, and you don't want to miss it. This isn't your average detox. It's a total mind-body reset that leaves you feeling light, energized, sleeping better, and ready to crush your goals. The best part, you won't be doing this alone. You'll be surrounded by our incredible, supportive community of women who are all working toward the same thing, feeling their absolute best. Together, we'll share tips, celebrate wins, and keep each other motivated every single day. Fall is the perfect time to reset before the holiday chaos hits. Head to the link in our show notes to grab your spot for our Fall Vitality 7-day reboot. Trust us, you'll thank yourself for saying yes to this reset. Welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast, where we empower you to take charge of your health and happiness. We're Marnie
and Stephanie,
board-certified integrative health practitioners, holistic wellness coaches, and passionate explorers of all things mind, body, and soul.
Each week, we bring you expert insights, real-life stories, and practical tools to help you bridge the gap between where you are now and where you truly want to be. From longevity and nutrition to mindset, movement, and healing, we dive deep to uncover the root causes of wellness and vitality.
Join us and our growing community as we explore what it really means to create your art of living well in a way that's authentic, sustainable, and uniquely yours. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Art of Living Well podcast. Today, we are going to be diving into a hormone that really affects all of us, and especially in midlife. And it is cortisol. And, you hear the word cortisol and maybe you think stress hormone, but it's really not just a stress hormone. It's really a health blueprint for your entire life. And Stephanie and I are going to talk a little bit about our own experiences with cortisol and just some of the experts that we really believe in, like Dr. Stephen Cabral, who we studied under, and Dr. Sarah Gottfried. We think that their ideas on cortisol, and we think that they have expert insights into stress and cortisol. And we've both learned a lot through testing our cortisol, and really, cortisol is meant to keep us alive in moments of crisis, but not for too long. If we're in a state of crisis all of the time, our health starts to unravel.
we're always in that fight or flight, fleeing from a tiger kind of, level all day long. So yeah, I think this is a really important one, Marnie, like you said, for a lot of women, a lot of middle-aged women, but men as well. Teenagers as well. We know our teens out there, for those parents or teens that are listening, stress is really at an all-time high for them too. So this is something to be mindful of even in those earlier years, and managing it so that when you get to middle age, hopefully you won't be in this fight or flight state all the time.
Which I think many people are running around in this state all of the time. So it's really about trying to get back to getting your system calm and relaxed, which I know is a challenge for me. I can speak to myself, and I'm sure Stephanie can agree. And so, what is cortisol?
Yeah. So cortisol is a hormone and it's made in our adrenal glands. And you may have heard the term adrenal fatigue, that's kind of where that comes from. And cortisol helps regulate your stress response. And I mentioned earlier that fight or flight, which is, always being on high alert, always, which you need when you are escaping danger or you're trying to get through a really big project or you're running a marathon or doing some sort of endurance event. You want to be in that state where you're using that cortisol to get you through whatever it is. It also regulates blood sugar levels, which we've talked about quite a bit on the podcast, our sleep-wake cycles, or our circadian rhythm, and we'll get into a little bit more of that, and the play between cortisol and melatonin. And cortisol, you want it to be high first thing in the morning and then gradually dip throughout the day. And it's the inverse relationship with melatonin, where you want it to start out low and then you want your melatonin levels, which is another hormone, to rise in the evening so that you can fall asleep. It also regulates our immune response and just overall inflammation and tissue repair, which is why we don't want to be in that chronic fight or flight state where our cortisol is high for too long, because our body's not able to repair and do what it needs to do at night, especially.
As we approach midlife, our hormones start to dip, right? And so that can increase our stress load. As our hormones are going down, we kind of are out of balance. And then the body is just trying to make more cortisol, which leads to more anxiety and more mood swings and more midsection weight gain and fatigue and brain fog. And you kind of get into this vicious cycle. And maybe you're waking up in the middle of the night and, your blood sugar is crashing and your cortisol is spiking and there's all of this stuff happening in your body. And it makes a lot of us feel out of control. And then the more you feel out of control, the more you want to control. And then, you're tense and your muscles are tense and your body's tense and your heart is racing. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about cortisol.
I think the blood sugar balance or the blood sugar regulation is a really big one. And it's really funny, actually. Yesterday, I had this client, she's like, and her sleep is very dysregulated because she works like odd hours. But she literally said she wakes up at 3 a.m. with such sugar cravings, her blood sugar is so low that she is eating cheesecake like at 3 a.m. because of this. So this is real.
And it's a common problem. Like, this is like, maybe that is unique to you, Stephanie, but I hear people talking about this where they're waking up, in the middle of the night and they are starving and they're snacking. And I think if you are trying to eat more of a balanced dinner and you have, your proteins and your fats and everything, hopefully you're eating enough that you're satiated through the whole night.
Exactly. And I think that's what happens. Sometimes people go a long time without eating and they think that they're doing something that's good for them by not eating, but it's the inverse.
And then you end up binge eating at night because you're starving.
Well, and what happens when your blood sugar dips too low, you don't sit there and say, oh, I'm going to make myself a piece of salmon and some vegetables. No, you're just going to eat whatever is readily available, whatever you're craving. And it's probably going to be sugar or something that's like a higher processed carb snack.
And I can speak to some of my own experiences with cortisol. Like a few years ago, when one of my kids was applying to college, this was actually a number of years ago. It was my first kid going to college. It was a very, very stressful time. He was stressed about it. It was stressing me out. And I remember I was not sleeping at night. I just was so tense and stressed and anxious all of the time. And I remember I did my first cortisol test and it was crazy high. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is terrible. So I immediately started trying to work on rebalancing my cortisol naturally and starting to try and do the things that a person can do to get that cortisol lower. And I think we should talk about some of them because I feel like a lot of people can relate to this feeling of just being so almost wigged out. That's how I would describe it.
Like overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I think most of us could say we're not feeling like joy and, I'm not going to say happy, but just like some element of joy and peace and calm, which I think a lot of people, that's what they desire, regardless of what your like interests are or where you are. And it's very hard to feel joy, peace, and calm when you're always constantly worried. A lot of moms I talk to are just worried all the time. And I'm not saying dads don't worry, but there is, I believe, in my experience, a greater percentage of women that are moms are more worried about their kids and worried, like we're watching the news and then you're worried if that's going to happen to them. And you're just constantly worried. And I do think that worry, that brain is what is preventing us from being in a calm parasympathetic state, I should say.
Well, it's interesting because this past weekend, I had my son home and one of my daughters home, and we went out to brunch and we were doing these conversation cards that I think you talked about once, but they were at the restaurant. And one of the questions was, what do you worry the most about? And I thought it was so interesting to hear. So for me today, I honestly worry the most about my mother. I feel like we're in the sandwich generation where, we have our kids, we have our parents and whatever. So I was sharing that that's something I worry about. And my son was saying he worries about us. And I was like, what? Wait, why do you worry about us? Like, we're fine. You don't need to worry about us. It was interesting to hear like what the kids worry about. But the moral of my story was my kids aren't particularly worriers. And that just was so nice to hear that they're on a day-to-day basis, they're really not worrying about a whole lot. And I was like, yes.
I mean, probably your goal as a parent, right, is not for them to be worried, because then they're maybe just more in the moment and they're enjoying themselves. And yeah.
But it's an interesting question to ask your kids. Like, what do you worry about? I thought I never asked them that before.
We'll talk a little bit about supplements, but before you even get to the point of taking a supplement, there are so many things, many of which we talk about all the time. These are not going to come to a shock to anyone, and they're free or inexpensive to do to reset. And really, you want to get your body in a state of equilibrium where it can do the job that it is designed to do. And that's part of the problem. Our bodies are so out of whack right now. And not only this emotional stress that we're talking a bit about, but physical stress and environmental stress from toxins and other things. So what can you do naturally to rebalance your cortisol? Well, just step outside. Literally just step outside in the morning and get some natural sunlight. And
it's such a good feeling.
I mean, there's nothing better. And in the summer, especially for us in Minnesota, I have a really hard time going to a gym to work out or do anything in the morning. Like, all I want to do is go outside.
Well, and I have to share, I lost my 4-year Peloton streak, weekly streak. I had a 4-year streak. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to be on the machines in my basement. Literally, I want to be outside. I'm going to have to let that go and do the things I want to do. And I did it. And it was really hard, but I'm getting outside and I need that. Not cortisol. I need that sunshine on my face.
I've never had a long streak because of that reason. I just am like, screw it. I want to be outside. And the thought of being inside in my basement on a bike when it's gorgeous out in the morning. So I never even got into the streak. But good for you for like really tuning in and listening to your body. And that's, I think, another really important point is sitting still and asking yourself every day, what do I need? What do I need today to feel however it is you want to feel? Insert adjective. Do you want to feel calm? Do you want to feel present? Do you want to feel some joy? Do you want to feel grounded? Whatever it is, what do I need? And then take time. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a full hour, and do that thing that's going to help rebalance your cortisol.
Absolutely. And I think that, a lot of us grew up in that generation where we're doing high impact cardio, pounding all the time. And that is not rebalancing your cortisol. If anything, I've learned it's raising your cortisol. I still really like that, running and high impact cardio. But this morning, I knew we were going to be talking about cortisol. I'm like, I need to meditate. I have not meditated in weeks. I was doing such a good job. Like when we train for 29029 or for the Grand Canyon or whatever, I'm really good about it. But as soon as I'm not on a training program, I'm completely off the rails with meditation. So this morning I meditated for 10 minutes, which is not that long, but it felt so good. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm breathing. Like, this feels amazing.
Okay, that is so funny that you said that because I haven't meditated and I don't even know how long. I'm like
Right.
embarrassed to say it because I don't even, when we're training, I'm like too busy to meditate because I'm
Well,
trying to
that's when
train.
I feel like I can make the space for it for some reason. I don't know
So
why.
anyway, I went outside on a walk with my weighted vest, which we've talked about. And I was like, I just need to sit and meditate here. Like my mind was just all over the place. And it was only 6 minutes, but it was better than nothing. And I haven't done it in a long time. So one, we want to share this because we are not, quote, perfect, whatever that even means. We're not. But I think at this point, we kind of recognize when you get to the point where you're like, okay, what do I need today? And you just prioritize that, listen to your body, whether it's skipping the HIIT workout, skipping the run. Because this morning I wanted to run. I haven't ran in a few weeks. And I just was tired. I'm just still tired from our trip. And it's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. So you get to a point where you like, okay, screw the metrics or the Peloton streak or whatever it is, or what I said I was going to do. And wake up every morning and say, what do I need? And that can apply to your workout. That can apply to conversations with your family about support or whatever it is you need. You know, maybe you just need help. Maybe you need to delegate some things to your family because you're feeling overwhelmed. And these are all just simple things that you can do to help reduce your cortisol.
And it can be really hard to do some of these things, like especially if we're trained a certain way. Even setting boundaries, saying no when you need to protect yourself. Going back to what Stephanie said, what do I need today? Well, maybe it's not saying yes, to your best friends to do this and to your son to do that and to whatever it is. Like if you feel like that is going to take away from your stress level, if it's going to add to your stress levels, you need to set boundaries around that. And it's really, really hard to do this, but just practice doing it even one time, like, and see how it feels and take note of how you feel.
Right. And I think for some people, and I've had this conversation recently with clients, is that, and it's family usually, like a brother or a sibling, or, oh, I always tell my, whoever I'm going to drive them places, or I'm going to drive my niece or nephew or wherever. Just have a conversation with them and maybe even rehearse what you're going to say in advance, but just tell them, listen, I'm trying to prioritize my own well-being right now. And this is really important to me. And I'm going to be able to show up better for everyone in my life when I'm in a calmer state. And so, you know what, for the next few months at least, like, please don't count on me to just spend an extra hour or two running around or whatever it is. Like, let's talk about how we can get what you need in another way. But the only person that's really going to have your back all the time and have your best interests is yourself, because only you know what you need. And I get that that's really hard, and family is important and you don't want to let people down. Let's face it, after a night out with friends, bouncing back the next morning isn't always easy. I used to feel like I had to choose between enjoying a drink and showing up the next day with energy. But then we discovered ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink, and everything changed.
ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic designed by PhD scientists to help you feel your best the day after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, an unwanted byproduct forms in your gut. That's what makes you feel off the next day, not dehydration.
ZBiotics is built to produce an enzyme that helps break down that byproduct. You simply drink ZBiotics as your first drink of the night, enjoy responsibly, and you're set up for a better tomorrow.
We've both had it before weddings, dinner parties, and girls' nights. And every time we wake up the next day feeling awesome, ready to hit the pickleball court or head out for a hike.
So as summer winds down, whether you're heading to a night out with friends or your next weekend getaway, don't forget to pack ZBiotics.
Go to zbiotics.com/AOLW
for 15% off your first order.
It's backed by a 100% money-back guarantee, so you've got nothing to lose. In addition to setting boundaries, setting your sleep schedule. I know this is hard to do if it's summertime. I mean, it's always hard to do, right? Like there's always something keeping people up. But I think really trying to get to bed, in your sweet spot, and you can kind of figure out what that is. Mine is between 10 and 11. 10:30 is like the ideal time to get to sleep. And then doing those things that you need to do to wind down before you go to sleep. Because at night, we want our cortisol to be low, right? In the morning when we're waking up, our cortisol is high. But in in the evening, we want it to be low. So like when I was talking about how I was very stressed with my son, this was already multiple years ago, my nighttime cortisol was like off the charts high. So that's not good. Then your wheels are spinning at night, you're staying up, you're not sleeping well. I've been trying really hard to wind down. Reading makes me fall asleep so fast. I mean, which is kind of sad because I like to read, and then I read 3 pages and I'm like, wait, what did I read the next day? I find that when I watch a show, which sometimes I like to do, like it with my husband or whoever, it's kind of fun to sit down and watch a show every so often, not so much in the summer. I feel like I don't go to sleep as easily when I do that. And that's probably because of, the electronics of the light and all of the things. And maybe the show had some action to it or whatever it is. And so it's like revving up your system. Like for me, reading or even taking a nighttime walk are like 2 of the best things to help me wind down.
When you can also do different breathing techniques, like there's the box breathing, and there's also the one that I learned about this when we did IIN. I don't know, what was it, 12 years ago now? That 4-7-8 breath that Dr. Andrew Weil talks about. That to me is really powerful. And you can do that anytime during the day. I mean, you could literally do it almost in the car, being mindful of where you are. But it's a really simple technique. We can link it up in the show notes. But you just breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7, and you exhale for 8. And it's very, very powerful to reduce, stress and anxiety, even like helping with depression. And so maybe you can go outside and do some breath work too. It's that habit stacking. So how do I get like my natural sunlight and some movement? Like a lot of these things we're talking about, some people may be like, well, I don't really have time.
You need like 10 minutes.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a set breathing pattern. Like if that makes you feel stressed, you can literally just breathe in, hold it if you want, and breathe out. And breathe in and breathe out. I mean, it can be simple. And
100%.
Definitely, I find that even if I just sit here right now and I take a deep breath in and a breath out, like my whole everything just relaxes.
Yes.
One breath. It's amazing that we have this tool and we don't tune into it more often.
When you think about how you breathe, are you mainly breathing up here in your chest? And are you taking really short, shallow breaths a lot of the time? That is a sign that you're not fully breathing. Like you need to take that big, deep belly breath that Marnie talked about. Breathing before you eat too. Because being in a high state when you're a high cortisol state, when you're stressed and worried when you're eating, doesn't allow your body to digest the food properly. And then you end up with like other physical symptoms, which we won't get all into today, but it is really important. And that's why, it's not something that we do. I grew up like saying a prayer. And I know sometimes people will pray before they eat a meal, but it's just like to pause and reflect and express some gratitude versus like put the food in front of you and start instantly like shoveling it in your mouth, which is like what my kids do, I feel like a lot of times. That's also.
And I was just going to say, even when we're talking about food, thinking about when you wake up in the morning. So I remember when intermittent fasting was first a thing, I thought it was amazing and I was going to give my body this fast and this reset. And then like the more I've looked into it, and I think this is very person dependent, mind you, but as a woman in midlife who tends to have higher cortisol levels, intermittent fasting is not ideal because that puts my body into this like stress state. And then my cortisol level gets higher and I am prone to being hangry. So for me, I need to make sure that I'm eating good healthy fats and protein and a nice amount of carbs so that I have a balance and I'm not hangry and I'm not spiking my cortisol levels because I'm starving myself. And I think, we all want to jump on these fads. And I don't know that fad, if you want to call it that, intermittent fasting, there are reasons to do it and there's a time and a place for it. But I don't think it's just a be all end all for everyone.
Right. It's not a one size fits all model by any. And if you're working out first thing in the morning, and Marnie and I really discovered this when we were training, with our coach, and she's like, if you have not eaten within, I think it was like 3 to 4 hours, which, when you wake up, you haven't, you need to put some food in your body before you work out. And it could just be like 100 calories or 15 grams of carbs or whatever it is. But so a lot of women wake up and then work out, or a lot of people do, because that's what works for your schedule. And so consider that, having a little bit, it's like a quarter of a banana and a little bit of a nut butter maybe, or a handful of nuts or something. Again, one, you're going to be burning those carbs as fuel and your body needs it. But also, like Marnie said, you don't want to go into a high cortisol state through working out, which is healthy, to some degree, when your body is already in a heightened high alert state.
I just remember a trainer I had years ago telling me that I should not eat before I work out on an empty stomach, work out really hard, and then wait a little while until you eat. And today I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the worst advice ever. But who knew, right?
That's what happens, though. You hear something from a person that you trust and respect, right? Not just necessarily a random person. And then you take that as sort of like the gospel and just do that for an extended period of time, even if it goes against how you feel or what you think you need.
It is so important to tune into your own body. And I love telling clients to journal and to keep a record of like how you felt on a certain day and what you did. And when you slept really well, what did you do to sleep well? Or, we're feeling calm for the day. What were the things that helped you feel calm? So I do love the idea of recording. It doesn't have to be like lots of details. It can literally be the date and a couple notes. And then you can look at your patterns over time. And I think that that's so helpful to determine what works for you.
And so should we dive in and talk a little bit about supplements and some lab testing? Because some people like to have numbers and metrics, and that motivates you to make change. So you may be out there feeling like, oh, I wake up and I'm exhausted. Well, that means your cortisol is not high like it should be in the morning. If you wake up feeling tired, that's not a good sign from a cortisol standpoint. There is testing that you can do. Marnie and I, as integrative health practitioners, can oversee that. So definitely reach out to us if you're interested, even just setting up a complimentary consultation to talk about like what lab testing may be right for you based on your symptoms. But it's a very simple saliva test. You take it 4 times, you spit into a little tube, send it off, and in a couple weeks, the results come back. And then it'll tell you, because it's not just like one cortisol sample. You want to know what your cortisol is at different points during the day, because you want it to be higher in the morning and then gradually lower, and then the lowest before you go to bed. And I know for myself, Marnie was sharing her kind of results, and I've done this test now at least 3 times. And recently I just did the evening cortisol test because that was my focus, and it's still high. I mean, it dropped a bit from when I think I first did it in 2019. So it's been several years. And I even took the test recently at night, and I took it like, in the middle of the week, and it was calm and I wasn't doing anything or going out, and I felt like relatively relaxed, if you will. I was a little disappointed, I have to say, when I got the results back. And I do think there's a lot of emotional stress that I've had a bit this year, and I think that's kind of driving it for me. So it's a work in process. It's something that I will probably constantly be focused on and working on. And I know I need to do more meditation, right? Like I said this morning. So maybe this is like a good jump start for me to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's also supplements that you can take.
Well, and I was just going to say, going back to the cortisol lab test, there are other places that don't test the different times of day. And I think it's really important for you to see in your own results what your cortisol is in the morning, what happens in the afternoon, and what's happening in the evening, because those are different snapshots of time. And because, my cortisol may have been okay a few months ago, doesn't mean it's necessarily the same today, because those levels are constantly changing based on what's going on in our lives. So we're looking at patterns, and we're looking at learning what we can do to naturally reduce those levels at nighttime.
Exactly. And part of it is having like tools in your toolbox. So like Marnie said, stresses are going to change over time because something's going to happen in your life. And so it's recognizing when you're starting to get into that chronic stress state, and then you dial back And maybe you start taking some ashwagandha and you start focusing on your sleep and doing some meditation and doing some breathing exercises because you have those tools in your toolbox. And, it's not just for kids. I actually just ordered this test we're talking about for my son who's 20. And I ordered actually a bunch of 4 different functional medicine lab tests that Marnie and I are trained on. And I'm having him do them right now. And he hasn't done this cortisol yet, so I don't have the results. But it'll be really interesting because I always consider him to be the least stressed of, well, the least stressed of the 2 older kids, I would say, I guess. And he's very chill about things and he's always relaxed. My gut tells me that he's not as relaxed as he sometimes perceives and that his stress is really high. So anyone can do this test, I guess, is my point. And, sometimes that's what you need is the numbers to give you a little jump start to take action.
Right. You can't fix what you don't know, right? And I think measuring is one of the best ways to have information.
Absolutely.
And there are supplements that a person can take to go alongside some of these natural ways that we're talking about. And I think the best way to kind of figure out which supplements are good for you is honestly to do like a supplement consult because, we can tell you, ashwagandha is great and magnesium is great and rhodiola is great and all these supplements. But really, unless we're looking at a full description of what you're taking, just say, oh, go out and buy some ashwagandha because maybe ashwagandha is already in something you're taking. And so it's really important to look at everything you're doing. And, we're not doctors either, but we are integrative health practitioners and we can, educate you on different supplements, but it's very personalized.
Absolutely, 100%. And just like we say, you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet. You can't supplement your way out of like chronic stress either. The bottom line is, and this is a hard message maybe to hear, but you're going to have to make lifestyle changes. There's just no other way to cut it. You can't keep burning the candle at both ends, compromising your sleep and doing everything for everyone else without putting on your own oxygen mask first.
Absolutely.
And then the supplements can help maybe accelerate that healing process and help reduce the stress. But the stress is not going to go away and the supplement is not going to zap it. There's no Band-Aid. We say that all the time. Unfortunately, there's no quick fix.
But you have your whole life, so we don't need a quick fix here. And I want to reiterate that so many women in my life right now are complaining about, the belly fat. And I have been reading so much about how your cortisol levels directly affect your belly fat. And it's not that you're just in midlife necessarily, but it's that our hormone levels are changing and then we're remaining in this fight or flight state. Just keep that in mind that there are things that you can do or we can all do to reduce these cortisol levels. And some action steps for you guys that we already talked about, but we want to reiterate, get the sunlight in the morning. It's the easiest thing you can do.
And maybe even evening sun. If you can take an evening walk, especially when it's warmer out, that helps regulate your melatonin too.
High quality breakfast. Don't wait forever to eat until you're hangry and starving. Make sure that you're listening to your body in terms of your workouts and, maybe mentally you need that run, but maybe really deep down you need the breath work or a zone 2 workout, which is easier on the system, frankly.
Consider testing your cortisol levels and consider what supplements may be able to help assist you in this journey to reduce your stress and get your cortisol levels balanced. Because the bottom line is we need cortisol. Cortisol is not the enemy. It can be our friend when it's used in short durations and to help us get through some really exhilarating situations, whether it's physical or mental. But it shouldn't be at a high level too long. And quite frankly, it won't be at a high level for too long because if you get to the point where it's in a chronic state, you will crash and burn, and then you won't have enough cortisol to just do the basic things. So if you're feeling tired and wired, or you wake up in the morning and you are always exhausted, that's a sign that your cortisol is very dysregulated. And, there's different phases we didn't kind of go into with cortisol, but when you've gotten to the point that it's not high enough in the morning for you to get out of bed with, 7, 8 hours of sleep and feel good and energized, then you've kind of maxed out. That's when you're sort of in that adrenal fatigue.
And remember, burnout is not a badge of honor. So many people still think it's a badge of honor. It's not. Staying up all night, being exhausted, that doesn't say that you're working any harder than the person that's getting 8 hours of sleep and has lots of energy. So it's just a different way to manage your lifestyle.
Absolutely. And we're here to help. We want to help you. Marnie and I have been there. We've both been through lots of stressful situations in our lives, and we're still trying to figure it out too. But we know that there are lots of options and relatively maybe simple but not easy strategies that we talked about to help make these lifestyle changes. And quite frankly, the more people around you that are doing these too, and the more you surround yourself with other, whether it's women or men or just people in your life that are also prioritizing their health and well-being, and they're going to bed at a reasonable hour and not asking you to stay up all night during the week when you also have to get up early for work or whatever it is, the more you're going to be able to make those changes for yourself as well.
If you have questions, comments, please DM us, email us. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions about testing or supplements, please reach out. Giving us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We really encourage you to reach out to us.
All right. Have a great day, everyone, and go get outside and get some sunlight.
Take some deep breaths and enjoy yourself. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Art of Living Well podcast. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It helps more people discover our show.
And if you're ready to take your health and happiness to the next level, we would love to support you. Whether it's through our transformative group programs, personalized coaching, or functional medicine lab testing, we help uncover the root causes of your health challenges and unlock your vitality.
Visit www.theartoflivingwell.us to learn more and book a free discovery call. Until next time, keep creating your art of living well.